Guten Morgen, sehr geehrte Damen und Herren, liebe Kolleginnen und Kollegen. Wir hoffen, Sie sind gut in diesen Tag gestartet und wir freuen uns schon auf die Gespräche und Diskussionen am heutigen Tag. Wir hatten gestern lange und intensive Diskussionen und was sich gezeigt hat, ist mit Blick auf Weiterentwicklung der Personalstruktur, dass die Tenure-Track-Professur im deutschen Wissenschaftssystem angekommen ist. Ich war nicht auf der Tagung 2020, aber was hier in den Gesprächen oder auch in den Diskussionen fiel, von denen, die dabei waren 2020, war schon, dass sie einen Unterschied wahrgenommen haben in der Akzeptanz dieser Tenure-Track-Professur, die jetzt ein Stück weit eine Selbstverständlichkeit in Anführungszeichen geworden ist. Wir haben sehr viel über die Weiterentwicklung der Personalstruktur diskutiert und hier insbesondere auch, wie das Tenure-Track-Prinzip generell auf Karrierewege implementiert werden kann und dass es jetzt um die weitere Ausgestaltung dieses Prinzips geht. Hinsichtlich auch, wir hatten es im abschließenden Panel noch, auch einer diversitäts- und bildungsgerechten Personalstruktur. Das heißt also, um einen echten Kulturwandel anzustoßen, gibt es noch viel zu tun und vielleicht auch ein Fazit des gestrigen Tages: Ausprobieren, mutig sein, einfach mal machen.
Ja, und von diesem Startpunkt aus sozusagen wollen wir heute den Blick noch mal etwas weiten, welche Chancen und Möglichkeiten für Tenure-Track es noch im weiteren Raum gibt. Im ersten Panel, das auf englischer Sprache stattfinden wird, thematisch bedingt, richten wir den Fokus auf Fragen der europäischen und internationalen Anschlussfähigkeit von Tenure-Track. Uns interessiert, wie gut das deutsche Wissenschaftssystem diesbezüglich dasteht und was noch getan werden kann, um mehr Transparenz und Vergleichbarkeit im europäischen Wissenschaftsraum zu erreichen. Das ist dann das erste Panel. Und im zweiten Panel werden wir den Blick noch etwas abrundend auf das Thema, auf den viel zitierten Kulturwandel fokussieren. Was verstehen wir eigentlich unter dem Kulturwandel? Wie weit sind wir damit gekommen schon? Das war ja ein Thema von Anfang an, schon in der 20er Tagung. Und was wir noch tun müssen, um den Kulturwandel noch weiter voranzutreiben. Bei diesen beiden Thematiken wünsche ich Ihnen viel Freude, inspirierende Gespräche und natürlich intensive Einsichten. Und dann übergeben wir wieder an Frau Liesbeck-Haag, die in bewährter Manier die beiden Panels moderieren wird.
Today I switch to English, we will start by looking beyond our borders and we will take the European perspective on our subject, tenure track models and tenure track models in the European research area. How is it going? And as you mentioned it, what could and should we do to harmonize all these systems, all the national regulations? And I will talk about that with Bert Overleit. He is Emeritus Professor at the Faculty of Business and Economics at Leuven. And for our discussion, very interesting, he has been chair of the LERO Careers of Researchers and HR Policy Group for more than 10 years. And regularly, as today, also represents LERO in topics of research careers or HR policy. Welcome, Bert. Take a seat. Nice to see you, Bert.
Thank you.
So, Bert, you have been involved in these topics in the European research area for many, many years. How did you get in personally? Because I know many people who say, okay, that's quite complicated on the European level. How did you get into this field?
Well, HR is my field. I'm a professor in HR and organizational change.
Yeah.
So that is one thing, and I've been acting internationally as a professor for many years.
Yeah.
But around 2000, I was asked to become the HR director of the University of Leuven. And so I served as a director of HR for 20 years. Mm-hmm. And of course, that brings you also in all kinds of political discussions, especially then in the country itself. And when the opportunity came, or when the opportunity arose to also represent LEU in the European political structures, I was happy to do so because we're all looking very much in our own country. All the discussions are in the own country. And being an academic and having teaching international MBA programs with 25 different nationalities, you very quickly learn that it is very cozy. So I would also like to thank you to invite me as a foreigner to this very cozy German, old German meeting. I managed to cross the border without control. But that's, well...
It could change.
I'm very sure I will get back. There's no problem with that. But no, I think it's interesting to look a little beyond. And fortunately, because I have family in Germany, I understand a little bit of German. So I think I was able to understand most of the discussions yesterday. But even with the language difference, there are so many things you have to know before you can follow the discussion, so much context factors you have to know. And we have been discussing in the LYRA group for more than 10 years. The first paper we made on the European career perspective was in 2010, Harvesting Talent. And so I have been having discussion with people from Germany for other countries. And yesterday I had a very great insight.
Which one?
That it is okay that I don't understand it. Because you don't seem to understand it either, right?
Yeah.
And I think what we could do maybe is talk about the reasons why it's so complicated.
Yeah.
And there are specific reasons why it gets so complicated and what we can do about that.
Yeah, we come back to that later. And you mentioned it, you are looking back at the last decade, of the past decade. What would you say, what has changed for research careers in Europe in the last 10 years? What has been changed? What is, because yesterday we talked a lot about what is complicated, of course, but now let's start. What has changed in the last 10 years?
Well, I think that over the last 10 years, maybe even 20 years since ERA started,
Yeah.
I still believe, I do believe we have to be aware of what has been the change compared to the 90s or the 80s, where if you would be in Germany and you wanted to do a 2-year stay as a postdoc in France, it was completely impossible. So now there is enormous lot of mobility between European countries, especially in early career phases. So there are a lot of more opportunities and possibilities that weren't there. We have all kind of fantastic tools. We have Euraccess, we have the HR label, the HR logo. So there are a number of things that put into place. We of course have the fact of European funding, which is of course never enough. I mean, we have the discussion now on FP10, but this is something that didn't exist and has created a European dynamic in research that everybody profits from. And I think there is another element that plays a role which is never discussed, but that's Erasmus. Because many people who are now researchers have been also going out somewhere in another country with Erasmus, and have met people from other countries in their home university because people coming to them. So I think this kind of dynamic is something that is completely different now than it was 10 years ago or 15 years ago. So I think we have made enormous improvement and enormous part of the road already. But that doesn't mean that we are where we need to be. That's, of course, the next question.
Yeah, let's to be a little bit more concrete. Let's talk about the stages of research careers. We yesterday talked about R1 to R4. How would you assess this impact of this framework, European framework of research careers? Does it have an impact? Does it really harmonize the mobility? Yesterday we talked a little bit about the different stages, R2, R3. Yep. Is it, how is it the interpretation in every country? How do you assess that?
I think it's a little bit double, right? It provides a language. It provides a way of talking to one another. Yeah. Before you find out yet that you don't understand each other. Because the European policy has been an approach to put another European layer on national institutions. Yeah. And we have to take into account that in terms of careers of researchers, of employment of researchers, and of career, that means what are the stages and what are the definitions, that everything is ruled by member states' legislation. There is no European rules. And in some countries like Belgium, my country, and your country here in Germany, it's even sometimes on subnational level. And there is no movement there. So something that I think is very striking on that the R1 to R4, that's very interesting. I also have some criticism, but that will come later. It did not have all these tools that we have now, all these exchanges that we have, all this collaboration has not led to any convergence between member states. On the contrary, we had this great visa directive saying that there were a number of principles we all adhere to. The visa directive has complicated the work of HR services all over Europe, because now we have 27 different translations. And if we go to that country, you have to know what the kind of rules are in that country. So we know the rules in every of the 27 European countries, and how much time you have to stay to do an announcement, to get clearance, etc., etc. And border controls won't help either. But it is complicated things, because Europe says this is what we're going to do, and then it allows the member states to translate that in their own agenda, in their own structure, etc., etc. And so something that we would like to tackle, and we press that very strongly at LERU, is we need convergence. And for research careers, I think what we have seen is enormous enthusiasm, but also enormous frustration about the fact that this is what people, in practice, young people are running against the wall, because if you come here in this country or in another country, in some countries, if you're not there for more than 3 years, you don't build any pension rights in terms of pension rights, etc., social security, taxations. There are always discussions about dual taxes. Even can you stay, can you not stay, can your family stay? It is a complete mess, I should say. And so we need to go to some form of convergence.
Yes, and because you just, I read the paper, a toolbox is not enough. It's a LERU paper, and you have really a clear criticism to the European Commission dealing with all these rules with national legislation. And so how do we proceed now? As you said, every country is applying differently. How can we now create this convergence?
Well, I think we're discussing now what is called the ERA Act. And the ERA Act is a legal initiative that would be developed with the European Commission and the member states in sync.
Yeah.
And which could look for first steps. I think what we have to do is look for first baby steps in terms of specific rules that will be there forever, that can be complementary to the national rules which are there now. And then, but it's still very vague for the moment, but we have to take first steps to protecting people trying to get a move to another country. Something else that we can do, and that, but again, that is something that is not structured for the moment, is to have inter-member states collaborations or discussions about, for instance, tenure track. We have, as Karin mentioned, we have looked at tenure track early in the beginning in 2014. Yeah. We looked at it 2 years ago as well. But, and again, you see that all the tenure track discussions are within countries, within member states. And why not having a group of 4 or 5 countries saying that we're going to try to find some convergence with what we are doing? And that maybe could start a dynamic in Europe which is different from the one that we see today.
So to build a small group, coalition of willing.
I don't like the term since Bush used it in the Gulf War, but it's coalition of the willing. Yes.
Yeah, yes, that's the term I remember. But is that also the reason because all the countries are in concurrence because the research, early career researcher, we want to attract them. And how can we manage that between concurrence and collaboration between some member states?
I think that we have to realize that this is not a contradiction. Mm-hmm. If we as Europe become more competitive, it will be benefit for everyone. And not just for the happy few that may attract people in general. I think broader perspectives will be beneficial to all of us. Even if we compete afterwards, why not, right?
Yeah.
But you have the same, you have industry boards, they're competitors too, but they have to really try to get structures in place. Let's for instance, even just in terms of clarification, many European countries now have tenure track, but the meaning of the word tenure is different in each country. It's different in Germany, in Belgium, it's different in Holland, it's different in France.
Yeah. Can you give us some examples, for instance, how is it interpreted in Belgium?
Well, in Belgium, at least in the Flanders region, because that's partly regionalized, the rules are different in Flemish region, in the federal level and on the French level, so it's a little bit complicated. But in our system, professors have a Beamte statute, so a civil servant statute, but they can be fired.
Okay.
Yeah,
How
so
is
that's a
that
very
going
interesting
together?
combination.
Yeah.
Which means that if they don't perform, so they get regular evaluations, at least every 5 years, but we do it more frequently. They get evaluations. If the evaluation is bad, they get a second chance. If they don't improve, they get fired.
And these evaluations are every 5 years, the whole career. It's not in the beginning, but
No. You get enough evaluations in the beginning because every time you want to move forward, you get evaluated. But it's until the end of your career.
Yeah.
And so I think for the last 20 years, the system exists. I think we only had 5 or 6 professors we actually fired. But I think there will be at least 50, 60 that suddenly went on early retirement.
That's the Gesichtswahrung in this case.
Which for us was the same result, so we were happy with that result.
Yeah. So that means, just for this example, how different are the status, Beamtenstatus or not? You told about the pensions and so on. So tenure track is in many details very different between the countries.
Yes, Denmark was mentioned. I think Holland and Switzerland have the same now. Even if you have a civil servant, you're not protected against being fired either. So there are subtle differences in each country, and there are, of course, the ones who are the champions of civil servants, which is France. Even if you kill your boss and your subordinates, it's difficult to get rid of them.
Good to know for all the people who are looking for the job. But from your European perspective, because you said at the LERU and you are comparing the systems, how's the German system? Looking from your European perspective, how do you perceive the German system and tenure track?
Okay, but now I'm talking about perception.
Yeah.
So don't blame me for that. The perception for the German is that it takes very long to become professor, and when you're professor, you're sanctified, you're sacred, untouchable.
Yeah.
Could
that be good also?
I think there is an issue with getting there, and the more people suffer to get there, the more they will abuse their status once they are professor.
Yeah.
So I think in terms of interaction between generations, this is not a good model. And I heard yesterday you talk about the Middelbau, trying to fill that gap, and tenure track is one way of filling the gap. But I think you should think about how the structure of the whole career could be adapted. And that I think every country needs to do, every member state needs to do that. We had a revision in the 90s for similar reasons, I think, why other countries revise it. We had, this is another issue with the R1 to R4. It looks like it is actually basically this kind of survival model. It's a sort of funnel, and every stage there are less people, and then the happy few are the ones who get to the top. Which firstly is there is one misunderstanding. You can perfectly be happy in R2 as well, or in R3. And so we wrote a paper a couple of years ago saying not harvesting talent, but delivering talent. With the image was a tree, and you're coming from a diversity of roots, and the PhD period and the postdoc period is a stem, and then you go out in different places, because 90% of people making a PhD never stay in academia. They are the rule. We are the exception.
Yeah.
So we should also have a career model that acknowledges the fact that it is not normal to become a full professor. I don't say it has to be something wrong with you, but it is not the normal from a statistical point of view. And it's only the very few who do that, and they have to be able to take the obligations and the duties and the responsibilities that takes with you, because it's a very tough job.
Yeah. But yesterday we talked about gatekeepers or the professors who are in place now. And as you described it now, are the professors in this academia really ready to see all the other career paths, or are they too much concentrated on the academia? What is your perspective? Also in your country, perhaps, because once you are in the system as a professor, you are dealing with all the things you have to do. Is there an openness to see all the other areas beside academia?
Yes, there's a lot of things we do, and I think most liberal universities to support early career research to see all the options. Now, I'm a little bit, I have the advantage of coming from Leuven. Leuven is number one one of the number ones in the world in terms of industry collaboration. So we get more than 15% of all our funding from collaboration with industry. There are joint PhDs with industry. We have a very intense collaboration. So the entrepreneurial aspect is very strongly developed. It's not there in every university, but we have a very strong industrial focus as well. So yes, and what is also typical in the Belgian system is that if you are a full professor, we don't know the idea of a chair. That doesn't exist anymore. That means that if you're a junior professor or you're a tenure track professor, you don't have to listen to the other guys. You can be independent, you can follow your own track, and that creates a completely different dynamic within your team. So I think there are a number of things which are not directly related to maybe to the tenure track itself or to the career, which is can you get rid of someone who is not doing what he needs to do? But also, if you get rid of the idea of a chair and everybody has to listen to the chair, that's a very hierarchical way of thinking.
Yeah.
But we're trying to get more flat teams and people are more experienced, have more other responsibility. Of course, there are differences in responsibility and there are differences in power because of the experience and the network people have and the achievements they have had. But we try to make it more into a team effort, and that creates a different dynamic, which is at least as much important as the structural, personal structure.
Yeah. Yesterday we talked a little bit about this department structure and
Yes.
Coming from the chair to the department structure, and from the department structure to a department thinking and responsibilities. So it's a long way, I think. And last question, perhaps, in our talk, and then we will go on the panel. As you mentioned it, the job market for researchers is changing rapidly in the moment, also internationally, of course, and so also looking to the United States of America. How do we deal with this development there, and how can we attract perhaps researchers from the United States? Can we, as European research area, attract researchers from abroad? I see some initiatives in some countries in the moment. France has also in the Koalitionspapier, they mentioned, I think, 1000 Köpfe program, something like that. How do you see that on the European level, this attraction, and to really react to these things in the United States of America?
Well, what's happening now in the United States is, of course, an opportunity, but it will be short-lived. I mean, the opportunity will just pass on again. I think we have to think on the long run. And I think several countries, including my country, have return programs, which focus, for instance, on people from your country that went to the US and then coming back.
We have that also,
we probably have that as well. We have, of course, Marie Curie, which is extremely successful. I think it is one of the best tools that we have in our toolbox. Have been extremely successful and will be improved because it's improving every time. But this is where I will answer as an academic. How you get people here, not by saying it's better here, it is because people have the opportunity to do research here. They won't have anywhere else. And so it has to do with the research infrastructure. It has to do with the fact for instance, that you're not bothered by people that were already there. How is the collaboration with the team who is already there? And how does your research and the research agenda that you have and bring with you fall into place with the research agendas that are already there in university. So it's much more on content than on conditions. Of course, conditions are important, and you need sometimes money to get that content working. I mean, you need some infrastructure to get people here. But I think the most important thing is to make sure that we have an attractive field, an attractive dynamic in our research, and create opportunities that may not exist in other countries, or at least are attractive in the face of other comparison to other countries.
And also coming back to the tenure track, also to attract young researchers, early career research from the United States. So we have to also to harmonize our European understanding.
If we would do that, we would be stronger.
Yeah, to harmonize and then to attract early career researchers. Otherwise, as you mentioned in the beginning, it's quite difficult to understand in which country, which conditions.
Yeah. And I think what most people will understand, they will ask you two questions: is what is tenure track, how does it work, and what is after tenure track? The last one is the most important one. And if that answer is not clear,
they don't come.
They don't come.
Yeah.
Or they go elsewhere, or they go to another place.
Yeah. For the moment, Bert, we just stop our conversation. So then we go deeper on some points on the panel. But before the panel starts, we have again the video with the participants of the tenure track workshop, and just let's have 2 to 3 minutes with the statements.
We talked a lot not just about European perspective, but also about the international perspective per se. And a point that was very important to me personally as someone with a non-academic background from a poor family was that gaining international capital is really not easy. It wasn't even on my horizon. I never flew to other countries during vacation because we didn't have the money, and I never applied for stipends to go abroad because it wasn't in my mindset. And we funnily had several others who were from non-academic backgrounds, and they completely agreed. So if you want to make the system more attractive for internationals or for people who gain international experiences, you need to take into account that this will make it either harder for people from non-academic backgrounds, or you should specifically increase awareness for those people, how they can still gain international experience even when they don't normally have the money to do that, or when they may be more afraid of going abroad.
Also grundsätzlich finde ich auch dann diese Lehrstuhlstruktur in Deutschland schon sehr krass. Also ich würde mich freuen, wenn dann sozusagen dann neben diesem Tenure-Track-Prinzip so eine Department-Struktur in Deutschland etabliert wird. Also das ist das schon besser, also sozusagen dann Machtmissbrauch und auch dann sexuelle Belästigung und so weiter und so fort vorzubeugen. Und das ist auch so eine Kontrollgegenmaßnahme für die Professorinnen und Professoren. Und dann ist sozusagen dann die Studierende und dann die Dozierende auch auf der sicheren Seite. Das ist so eine gegenseitige Kontrolle, so eine Schutzmaßnahme auch für die Studierende.
So we talked a lot about the transparency of the system. So career paths in German academia are not really transparent, and during the last 2 decades the system changed a lot. So we have habilitation, we have habilitation equivalency, we have tenure track professorships and junior professorships with or without tenure track. We have so many junior research group leaderships, and we have even more. So it's not even transparent enough to postdocs within German academia. So if you want to make it more attractive for people from the European countries or other countries beyond yeah, you need to make the system more transparent and easier to understand and maybe also more comparable.
Besonders als ausländische Mitarbeitende, dann würde ich mich sehr freuen, wenn sozusagen mehr zusätzliche dann Coachingsangebote für ausländische Mitarbeitende geben würde im Hochschulsystem und vor allem dann in den deutschsprachigen Raum gibt es dann in Deutschland ein ganz besonderes Hochschulsystem. Da muss man zuerst mal kapieren, was ist eigentlich dann Promotion, was ist Habilitation und Tenure-Track und ohne Habilitation oder mit Habilitation und dann unterschiedliche sozusagen dann ja, einfach mal diese Informationskanäle zu schaffen, das ist total wichtig.
And now I would like to invite the panelists to come here. I will introduce you when you are here. Welcome. Take a seat wherever you want. So, yeah, I would just like to introduce you shortly who's with us. Start in alphabetical order, as always. Professor Peter André Alt, with the really shortest distance with the office round the corner I saw in the morning, in the management board of the Wibben Stiftung Wissenschaft, former president of Freie Universität Berlin and former president of German Rectors Conference. Welcome, Herr Alt. Schön, dass Sie da sind. Doktorin Julia Eremenko, research assistant and postdoc at the University of Kassel. She's a sociologist and political scientist, and she conducted research in Germany, Poland, and Russia, I learned from your website. So
and France.
And France. So international and European perspective and internationally. Welcome.
Thank you.
Bert Overlet, I introduced already, so we just jump to the next person. Jürgen Janger is there, senior economist at Österreichisches Institut für Wirtschaftsforschung, and in different research projects, European Commission funded studies like mobility of researchers, and as a project manager of the project, the Sustainable Careers of Researcher Empowerment, SECURE project. You perhaps can talk a little bit about the findings of this project. Welcome, Mr. Janger. Nice to have you here. Professor Thomas Pertsch, Vice President for Research and Innovation at the University of Jena. And he was a pioneer in 2008, as he was the first person at the University of Jena who took the step from junior professorship to professorship. So you were the pioneer on this track of career. Thank you and welcome. And Frau Doktorin Christiane Wöllner, Manager and Director of the Research School of Ruhr-Universität Bochum, dealing every day and every week with early career researchers from all over the world. Welcome. So let's start to begin to clarifying some key terms, Mr. Janger, and you published with this SECURE project model of tenure track-like models. Could you explain this? What are tenure track-like models, and how are they defined, and what's the difference to the tenure track system, so that we just understand?
So we're coming back to what you discussed before with Bert already. In principle, national systems are incredibly heterogeneous. There's a large variety of different career paths. And the ambition in this project was to identify in several European countries, 10 European countries, I think, to identify career path models that share a tenure track principle, that you switch from a fixed term position to a permanent position based on ex-ante defined criteria, or that you, when you start the job, that you know already you can have a permanent employment based on an evaluation of your performance. And I think this is the tenure track principle that also holds here in Germany. And we tried to find examples of this in several European countries. And in a nutshell, every European country does it differently. There is no single system, but the principle is there in several European countries. It's not a unique principle that only holds in the US, for example, or now in Germany.
Yeah, so the different interpretation, as Bert also explained us. So what kind of impact do these models have on the European research area? So your findings, there are some common terms, but what is the impact now? Are they helping to create a more coherent space for early career researchers? What is the impact now?
So this project has come into being actually as kind of a support tool to implement the Council recommendation on research careers, which is a recommendation by member states to themselves, so to speak, to implement tenure track models. And so we have this legal incentive, so to speak, to implement tenure track. But in my view, what we will now see in the European research area is because early career researchers prefer tenure track jobs, tenure track models, so the best talents will go to the places which offer tenure track places. And so we will see a competitive adjustment driven bottom up by researchers flocking to tenure track principles. That would be my, so there will be, in my view, there will be a slow pressure, bottom up pressure to establish tenure track as a general job feature, would be my prediction.
Any comments on that? Because I have another question, but if there is a pressure bottom up, as you mentioned that is, you have to understand all these different systems. As we heard also here in the statements, it's so complicated, the difference. So how can we create this bottom up pressure from early career researchers? They have to understand the system. And if they say, as Bert explained, in this country it's like this, and there I have this question. So is it realistic?
So sure, it's easier if it's the same model everywhere, and it's also, for example, for the question of US-based researchers coming to Europe, if there's like one model and it's much easier, there's no doubt about it. On the other hand, I would not overrate national differences in implementing tenure track models. Researchers are intelligent people, they understand texts, and if they look at the models, I'm sure they can understand differences. So I'm not trying to underplay the importance of convergence and harmonization, but I guess I'm saying it's not absolutely necessary that every country has exactly the same model, even if it would help.
Herr Pertsch.
So I like that approach very much. So I mean, our scientific community is living a lot from diversity. I mean, we discussed this aspect yesterday, and diversity is also in diversity of systems. Yeah. So if we would streamline the entire system to one track, yeah, I think it could be the wrong track. Yeah. So therefore, this diversity should always be kept. And I'm fully with you in that. Researchers are usually smart people. Yeah, they can adapt to certain environmental conditions as long as they know. Yeah, and so therefore transparency is one of the major aspects. Yeah, and then this convergence, this will happen by itself. Yeah, by the survival of the fittest. Where not the fittest is now the young researchers, but is the universities which offer. Yeah. And therefore we have this competition process, this bottom-up pressure we already have. I mean, we discussed yesterday that we are all short of talents, yeah, so, and that we are having problems in filling positions and so on. So therefore, the competition among the universities for the best system is already started. Yeah.
Yeah, I just want to add, based upon our experience, that the structure and the systems are different. But what we found out amongst Larry universities is that there is a dynamic happening because of tenure track, which is very similar. And the dynamic has to do with very simple things like, for instance, when we first started with these things, the idea of setting goals up forehand was considered to be an idiocy. I mean, you don't go to evaluate professors on basis of goals, I mean, who thinks about that? And in the first times that we had to make these sort of contracts, agreements with the candidates, so it was a learning process, and now we have learned that. It works very well. We also changed the contracts in the sense that originally it was, this is what you need to do to get your tenure, and now it has two paid parts. The other part is, what is the university going to do to support you? mentoring systems which were not considered to be normal. I mean, if you needed mentoring, you were not suited as a professor. So it's not because you needed mentoring, but the mentality has all changed, and there is a complete different way, in such a way that in Leuven we ask ourselves the question, why do we do that only with tenure track? And where we have a transfer of a senior professor from elsewhere, why shouldn't we do the same? Having the same mentoring, the same backup, also the same type of agreement. So this is something that is also changing. Tenure track is not only in terms of personal statute, but it looks at practices of onboarding very differently for senior academic staff, which I think is a very interesting evolution, and it's independent of the rules.
Herr Alt, wollten Sie dazu? Und dann
I would completely agree, because I think if we take a look at the mother country of the tenure track system, the United States, you witness a diversity of models, even on the level of the institution, not on a political level or a country-based level. And this worked well, even though it was that diverse. So let's take a look at the principles, not at the differences, and then also connect this with the process you have described quite well. I think it's a process which is reshaping academic institutions in terms of structures, in terms of hierarchies, in terms of role models, and also in terms of values. And that was something we were talking about yesterday. I think the German system is facing this process of reshaping its structures, also with regard to principles. The principle of the unity of teaching and research, for instance, which has been, to a certain extent, also a burden, has to be overcome to a certain extent. And this is something we must take into account when we talk about tenure track, focusing on the principles, focusing on the development, which is undergoing now and going on, and that's most important, and more important than the differences we've witnessed all over the world.
let's talk to an early career researcher who was coming back from a foreign country to the German system. And so how attractive is the German system for you, coming back from another country, coming back from abroad? What did you face? What do you think, what has to change for you as a young researcher to come back, to reintegrate in the system?
So I think tenure track is a wonderful idea, but the thing is that after I did my PhD at the University of Bamberg, I won Marie Curie postdoctoral fellowship and I moved to Poland. And then for another grant I moved to Paris. And then I was too overqualified to apply for tenure track. So for me the only option was to use the old system with habilitation, what I'm currently doing at the University of Kassel. So you almost excluded, penalized people who are principal investigators of big grants, so they couldn't enter tenure track anymore.
So you are between the systems, a little bit between the two paths. Mr. Pertsch.
Yeah, I think that's a key experience. So we discussed this already in the workshop preparing for today's conference. Yeah? And tenure track for me is a kind of keyword for introducing more flexibility in the systems and not for introducing yet another rule. Yeah? So we had a system which was based on rules which we found too static, and then what we shouldn't do is implementing another rule which is again static. Yeah? So like a career track which we call now tenure track but is like fixed. Yeah? So Julia's experience is exactly what's happening to a lot of people. They are not like black or white, they are something in between. Yeah? And then we have to implement more flexibility into the system, and tenure track for me is just a key word to say it's a track system. It's not like phases and things, yeah, R1, R2, R3, nice, but it's a track. Yeah? And you can enter in and out at different positions. I mean, these international careers, they are so complicated. So who wants to make a rule for that? So this will never succeed.
Yes, not rule, but we are talking about transparency. But Mrs. Wöllner, you are dealing every day with international early career researchers. What are the questions? How do they perceive the system here?
So I would like to comment on your comment. So I completely agree with you. So tenure track is a name, And perhaps every country has a different perception of tenure track, but we need a clear system and a transparent system that allows young people to come a step forward, step by step with a career track to come to another position. So in Germany it's a little bit complicated, so we are really unique. We start after the PhD as wissenschaftlicher Mitarbeiter, and then when we enter the professorship position, then we are professor. But in between, we have no differentiation. Yeah, there is nothing in between, and so we have the postdoc in between. Yeah. But the postdoc first step, second step, third step. But there is no name. So
yeah. You're always losing title. I was assistant professor.
Yes.
Now I'm a postdoc again. So the circle come back.
You know, and when you go back, you are a postdoc again. And when we, with my colleague, we are so also responsible at our university for talent acquisition, recruiting, or looking for early career researchers. And when we are going abroad, Brazil or Japan or former times Russia, so this tenure track, so they don't mention tenure track. They are not interested in tenure track. They want to go to Germany for a certain time to gain research experience, to work here in Germany, but they are not really interested in having a permanent position here. So, and for us, when we explained this tenure track principle in Germany, or we explained the career tracks in Germany, it's complicated for them. Yeah, because the other systems are completely different, and to broaden the view outside Europe.
But what does that mean? Tenure track is one track, as you mentioned, one career track step by step. Then we have the other things. What does that mean when we are looking for talents from abroad? What is your experience? They want to come to gain research experience, then going back, and we want this mobility. That is also one aim of in Europe and also abroad. So how to deal with these wishes, with these ambitions?
So we need a system more flexible. So yesterday when we heard the system from Hamburg or Bremen, so when I look at the system, I always ask myself, where are the entrants for internationals? How can they enter the system? So yesterday we had a really German discussion.
Yeah.
Really. And when I look at all these discussions with my international view, with all the experience from outside, then I ask myself, we have to look for a system what is good for our people, but also is flexible for people from outside, that they come here, that they enter the system, and that they go with another name when they go back. So in our working group from here from the Tenure Track Network, we analyzed 10 countries, so not Europe, 10 countries in the world. What are the career system? What are the different career steps, starting with PhD, ending with full professorship? And then also we add interviews, expert interviews from these countries, from some of them from the countries. And then we saw that especially Germany, all other countries, they are working with assistant professorship, associate professorship. They have these after the PhD. So the postdoc is not really qualification phase. So they enter as researcher, a lecturer, and then assistant professorship, associate professorship. And this is mobility. And in Germany, we have not this denomination.
So what do we need? You gave us some points to get more attractive for international mobility. Do we need new terms? Yesterday we talked about terms. Do we need new phases? What do we need in the German system to be more attractive to these researchers?
I think we are attractive when it comes to these early stage researchers on the R2 level and also for the doctoral candidates.
Yeah.
We have many doctoral programs with half international, half national candidates. So I think Germany has done well here. But the problem is how to keep them in the system. So I would agree that most of them want to stay just for 1 or 2 years. But there are some who have come to stay. And for those, we need a good offer. And this offer is the tenure track system, definitely. And I would like to pick up your argument also. I think it's necessary to have both the traditional system and the tenure track system, and what we really need is more transparency in the appointment schemes. So the universities should reveal which position they want to refill by the traditional way, on which position they will by an early reappointment refill via tenure track. You won't find it on the websites, and I think the 90 German universities need to be much more transparent here, because they all had made their plans already for the next decade, but no one knows. And if you, as a candidate, want to know what are my options in my field, you need more information on that, and you haven't usually. I think transparency is not only a question of the individual position and the target agreements which are connected to it, but it's also about the general strategy of the university.
I ask myself, because we can go, why don't they promote that better? We come back to that later. Herr Pertsch und Frau Wöllner noch vielleicht dazu. Yes?
So, looking on the international level, I think is very interesting. But we should first, I think, turn a bit our perspective into identifying the potentials which we are otherwise losing, and not so much concentrating on like all the problems which we see, which obviously exist in the system. But the motivation, I think, should be much higher in using this potential which is within the national internationalization. Because as you described, we had been doing very successful on the undergrad level with all the Erasmus. It's really great, this exchange which happened. Then there are these international doctoral schools, which are really great. And then if you are looking at the professor level, it's all German. I mean, some really, universities have already moved a bit, but looking at the percentage, so it's quite clear that we are losing this entire, or we are not making use of that potential which is in the internationalization. And we should ask ourselves, universities had previously been like the forerunners of internationalization processes. If you are looking at like modern companies now which are internationalized, and you are looking at their leadership, this is fully internationalized. If you are looking at the leadership of German universities, German, so therefore something is not yet up to the modern system, and we are losing a lot of potential if we are not moving ahead.
But this is a good example of the let's say the discrepancy about European and national policies, because we are now having this new commission saying that we have to speed up our attractiveness for international talents. At the same time, both in the Netherlands and Belgium, governments make rules, make it difficult to get international students, because they say there are too many people around from everywhere. And so what is discussed in Europe, and then sometimes the governments do exactly the opposite thing. So this is very confusing for those who want to come to Europe as well. I mean, we don't have a clear strategy and sticking to that strategy. And I think it is also a little bit of a culture, like the UK, the Anglo-Saxon universities have even more international influx than on the continent. And I think in smaller countries it's a little bit easier. Right? I think this is something, if you would like to look at other countries, don't go to France, but go to Scandinavia, Belgium, Holland, Switzerland. These are the small countries. We are international. I mean, we have a much larger part of the world is abroad than in your case. So if we only would fish in our own pond, it's a small pond. So we are very international, and we try to have 25% international professors, which is difficult with the government that doesn't like it. But that's the only way to progress and to move forward and to get a sort of balanced composition. And we want 50% of all of our students have an Erasmus experience, and we're almost there. So these are the kind of targets which show, but the smaller countries are much more European than the big ones.
Of course, yeah. Mr. Younger.
Yeah, just an important technical detail here is the ability to teach in English. And I don't know if it's possible in Germany. The Netherlands, it was really well established, and now they're reducing it because of political reasons.
They exaggerated a little bit.
Yeah, but so how can you attract people who don't speak German if you ask them to teach in German? It's very difficult, I think.
Yeah, but the Erasmus students plays a huge role. You have to teach them in English. You have to have English courses.
But you can teach in English in Germany, then that's no problem. And yet there are English language courses.
Yeah, you can participate, but like you need to give international researchers, I think, time, because if this is their first, because I learned Polish when I was in Poland, I learned French when I was in France, now I'm learning German when I'm in Germany. So you need to give some time for the researcher to fulfill this language gap, and then it will be different.
But I know also discussions in some German universities, the full professorships who said, okay, no, I started to teach in German. I don't know if I could ever teach in English. Let's be frank, there is a discussion, and many professors are not able or they are not willing to learn when they are many years in the system. There are many, it's depending from the department, of course, but there are many refusals in Germany to teach in English. This is a main topic, I think, to attract international researchers and students. Yes, but you mentioned all that, and it leads to a question, what kind of mobility do we want? What is realistic? Do we want, should we be fostering on exchange, and the people are leaving, as you mentioned it, or could we have a mobility to attract and to retain the people? So what kind of mobility is discussed? And what kind of mobility is done realistically? So that is the key question, I think.
I think that it's very much depending on the we, because from the European perspective, we need a system with circulating brains. That's the best way it is, and I think this works quite well. It's depending on different cycles. We had, during Corona, we had problems with that, and during the period of establishing the bachelor, the number of students going abroad was going down a bit, but now it's again increasing. From the institutional perspective, you have a different interest, I think. The first is also to have international students, international doctoral candidates, because diversity is always a booster for intellectual creativity and for innovation. That's definitely the case. Many politicians do not understand this. Hopefully they will. And in the end, there is also the question of recruitment. And recruitment is more than circulation. It's more because it's about the institutional outcome, the research performance, and there should be also an interest of hiring international people, because the same counts here. Diversity, different experiences, biographies, backgrounds bring in a lot of ideas and mix up the discussion and always leverage the level. And I think this is very important here. So the institutional approach should be one with a strategical interest in hiring people, and the general systematical approach should be enabling people to have exchange and to get different experiences worldwide.
Mr. Perch, but he described that we have international researchers, but we lose them when it's coming to full professorships. There's a gap. So how to change that to get the leadership and also the full professorship more internationally? So there is a problem.
Yeah, I don't see really a problem in the system. It's mainly a problem, as you described, maybe with the people who are reluctant. Yeah, I mean, you described nicely, Mr. Younger, that the teaching is said to be a problem. Yeah, but if you are looking at successful universities, they are introducing international teaching programs. Yeah, to attract the young students. Yeah, and at least at our faculty, we always introduce the international teaching program also with the aim to be able to be attractive for international professors, because they can do their teaching. Yeah, so and therefore it's going hand in hand if you want to. Yeah, and one outcome of the workshop which we had for preparing for today's symposium is that. the tenure track system really allows also that convergence process, because we don't have to appoint somebody who cannot speak German at that moment, and then you have in the discussions, you tell them, yeah, maybe in 5 years or something, but nobody can track. Yeah? So in the tenure track models, you can clearly identify that as one of the convergence goals, that after these 3 years, you have to be able to teach in German. Yeah? And 3 years is something which is kind of realistic to do, at least little classes, and then after the final evaluation, you should be like fully in the system. And this allows a degree of freedom which we before didn't have. Yeah? And therefore, it's a nice thing also for internationalization.
Well, sometimes I think there are very simple practices that you can implement. What we did in Leuven was at some point in time we decided that there will not be any position filled anymore if there would not be good international candidates. And if there was not a good international competitive candidates, and we had 5 excellent candidates from inside, we wouldn't appoint one of these 5. It took us a couple of discussions before everybody agreed and accepted that. But since then, the number of good international candidates is rising systematically. And we are happy to be able to recruit much more internationally than before. So it's also something about what yesterday was Jetta Frost said that it's a cultural change, and this cultural change, this organization change, is something that goes slowly because universities are, academia in itself is very conservative. It's remarkably conservative for a group who is devoted to research and innovation. But we like to do things the way it was when we were young. And that's much too long ago, so you have to open up. But these are small measures you can take to continue to grow internationalization.
Beyond this, I think this is a fundamental question. In Germany, institutions must learn that not only the candidate applies for the institution, but the institution also applies for the candidate. And this starts with the announcement of the position. It's published in English, but the rest is just referring to legal environments, to duties, to collaborative research centers, which are important for the candidates. And there is no information on the academic system, on the general culture, linked to health insurance questions and many other aspects. So, and this will be later also continued by the welcome centers, which are not centers, but have distributed their services to different awkward divisions of the central administration, and no one understands who is competent for what aspect of your problems. So this is not a one-stop agency, but it's a puzzling picture of different competences and expertises and services which might be in place, but not really effectively available then.
And just a short question before Mrs. Wöllner and Julia. You described that, and this is common sense. We know all that, because why don't they change this, the university? Are they in a quite comfortable situation so that there is no need to communicate all these details as you described? Why is the communication as bad as it is? So are they not aware of the situation that they have to communicate more to attract people? What is the reason? Are they zu selbstgewiss? I don't know the word in English.
But I can answer from my experience. They don't have the money. This is costing money. We didn't have the people to do so. I mean, there is a very important, all the discussions we had so far today and yesterday, European programs, etc., and it means that we have to invest as institutions much more than before into the context of employment, the context of research, the culture, etc. How much funding is there? Zero. Not from the national level, not at the European level. So this is one of my favorite comments to EU administrators said, put your money where your mouth is. You ask us to do all kind of things and it costs us money, but who is going to fund that? I mean, we don't have a printing press in the cellar saying we're going to print a number of euros. I think if you give, and there have been national initiatives in different countries, if you give people, the institutions, a dedicated amount of money for doing these kind of things, it is set up in a couple of weeks and it works.
I'm not sure, but it's a question of awareness, but also perhaps Ms. Wöllner.
But talent acquisition, it costs money. And we are really lucky because at our research school, with my colleague, we have the possibility to go abroad, to go to other countries, and then we give workshops. We explain the German system, we explain the research system, we explain how the young people can get in touch with the universities, not only for Ruhr University Bochum, so in general, how can you get in touch with the German university or with the people. And then at our research school, at our university, we have really small programs, but these are programs they are attractive for the young people because they can come over for 3 months or 6 months to get in touch with the professor, to get in touch with the chair, and then to figure out is it interesting for me? So fits it, the professor and the young people, and then we offer them workshops how to write a grant. Yeah, because at the university we have not a lot of positions, so not permanent positions, but positions, and so we encourage all the young people to write grants, to receive third-party money, and then to return at our university. And so we have a success rate of 25%, 30%. So from the people, they come to us and then they will return. But this is really a seldom program, and we are very lucky that our university invests in that. So in general, what I would like to say before is, if you, at a university, you can attract the people for the PhD phase. This is a little bit easier, because they're younger, they are human beings, and also it is important that they feel comfortable in the country. And if they are younger, then they have the possibility to learn German. Perhaps they find a partner, they big love, and then this is really really important. But in the German system, we have one problem. If you receive your PhD, doctorate from a German university and you want to stay at this university, then you have to go back for a while. And then it is retaining, to keep them, to be in touch the whole time, and then to draw them back to the university.
And that is a work with many steps. You need money, but you need also the awareness, I think. But Julia was
I think you're doing a great job, because I participated in one of your workshops a couple of years ago. Thank you. Yes, when I was in Poland, I was because when imagine you're a foreign researcher. You're Googling for positions. So the position called wissenschaftlicher Mitarbeiter, researcher. So is it a postdoc? Is it assistant professor? Is it associate? If I'm overqualified, not qualified enough, there is no explanation of an entire system. And you try to Google another thing. Give me some kind of picture where will be the equivalent of assistant professorship in Germany. And there is no such a picture. And there is no such a idea, just to draw some picture would show you as it was before with a diploma, for example. 5 years, bachelor is less, master is more, this is a system. And can we have such a thing just for international scholars to understand where is this wissenschaftlicher Mitarbeiter in the system? And is it equal to one position or to another one? And it makes the life of international researchers easy, and they will apply then, because they understand, this is position for me.
When the first time we were in Brazil, it was really funny, because I explained the whole system: PhD, postdoc 1, postdoc 2, junior faculty, then you are eligible to apply for a professorship. And all the young people, and I thought, why they're looking so
puzzled.
Yeah. And then they explained me, so after the PhD in our country, you are eligible to apply for a professorship position. This is not a permanent professorship position for your whole life. So you can be fired after, if there's no money, if there's no need for the research, then bye-bye. So, and this is important for us to understand the different career systems. Only with this knowledge we can modify our own system.
But as Mr. Alt says, more information, more detailed information, and more information about the circumstances, about the life conditions, and so on and so on. And apparently that is not enough, as Julia mentioned, beside these positions. What does this country offers? What I'm expecting from my working field, and so on and so on. Apparently, there is a lack of information in every aspect.
And you're waiting that it have to be explained in the call, but not it have to be explained somewhere else. Because the call translated by the secretary of the professor, just with a, I don't know, DeepL or someone, and there is a direct translator researcher. What kind of researcher? Like, and then this is a huge problem because you don't understand, is it for you or not? And makes sense because it's a really time-consuming thing to apply, because you need to present a project, etc. And then you're thinking, no, this is just a researcher. Maybe this is a PhD student. I don't need to apply here.
Yeah. So more differentiation also in the call, you said, to get more detailed information. Mr. Younger.
I just wanted to ask the question what role the leadership structure plays here. And we've heard from the person in the video before that there still seems to be this chair-based system, so I don't know how much that still holds. But if you have a more collegiate department-style organization of universities, it's much easier to rotate people who manage actually the university or the departments. And I would bet that that would favor international people coming into the leadership structure. And then I think you would have change from within universities, because as soon as you have someone international, like if you, Julia, would be head of the department, you would be aware of all the problems you faced, and you would make sure within the university that those easy explanations are provided. And so I don't know, as I said, how much this chair-based structure still holds in German university, but in my view, this is a key thing which would make the German system more open, if it was still strong. Yeah.
I'm coming to another aspect also, Mr. Alt, you're here also as a management board member of the Wübben Stiftung. And the Wübben Stiftung has launched 2 programs for the tenure track, the Appointment Accelerator and Tenure Track Professorships. So why do you do this as a Stiftung? Do you fill some gaps in the system? And how are these programs received in the moment? Just to get an impression.
We were addressing the questions we were talking about here. First of all, there is definitely a gap. There is a mismatch between the permanent positions, non-permanent positions. We need more tenure track positions, and we need also more international professors. We have talked about this. Roughly 10% of the permanent positions are filled by international people. It's not enough. And the second problem for the universities is usually they establish tenure track professorships as an early reappointment. The chair will be available in 5 or 6 years, and then the W1 or W2 position will be established. So they regularly haven't enough money for that. They have to switch from the so-called Mittelbau to a tenure track position to finance it. This would effectively downgrade the ratio of positions at the Mittelbau. It's not really something we want to. We need both positions, and for this reason, we either finance the direct salary of the tenure track position for international candidates, or we provide support for the general equipment, onboarding procedures, and so on. There's also one observation. Many of these positions have not any kind of endowment, and the candidates are not offered negotiations. I think we must upgrade these positions, and that's something we do as a foundation by offering them technical equipment, instrumentation, doctoral candidate positions, and also dual career measures, and we support also money for the onboarding process. And in general, the universities need a little bit time to be aware of the chances they get by our program. But it works well. Now we not only wait for applications, so that the thing I was talking about concerning universities, we try to be a role model. We directly address universities. We offer workshops giving information on recruitment strategies, which worked very well. And so in addition to the program, we want to generally improve the welcome culture of universities, the general higher recruitment strategies. And so this is a general complementary structure, both financing the system
Yeah,
and
okay.
directly improving the standards of the academic cultures.
In which phase of the programs are you now? Are there universities who have already applied for this?
Yes, we have already decided on the first call, and the first positions are filled now. And we had the second call, which is running now, and the next will follow in a couple
And
of
how
months.
we are talking about how many positions?
So that's depending on what universities are applying for in the Appointment Accelerator program, which is dedicated to the general framework of the position, to the equipment and so on. We offer 400,000 euros for the professorship, 1.2 million euros. So it's depending on the application whether this is completely needed or not. So we can do a lot here in 1 year's time, and the program is made permanent, so it's continued, and it's not only running for 1 year, it's not limited. So that's our very center of the program, of the foundation. So in addition, we have also an advanced professorship program for international candidates who have already been reached the R4 level. This is complementary to the tenure track, but the tenure track is a very important issue for us.
So just to give this information also for all the people from the universities, I think we make now a stop here on the panel, just waiting for the questions from the audience, to have some more details for your interest, to have some questions. Gibt es Fragen? Sie können das auch gerne auf Deutsch machen, das kriegen wir auch übersetzt hin, das ist überhaupt kein Problem. Also wenn es da Fragen gibt, gerne jetzt. Es gibt eine.
Yes. Okay. So, hi. Christiane, you mentioned that for many international researchers, that we have tenure track is not that attractive or interesting as we think. But then again, they don't have this Zeit-VG. So I wonder, wouldn't it be much more groundbreaking in attracting international researchers if we didn't have this Zeit-VG? Not speaking as an opponent of the Zeit-VG in general, but if we think about those people who come here and, as you said, fall in love and have children and then find that they would like to stay here and stay researchers, isn't the tenure track then sort of a makeshift construct with which we try to get around this major sort of stain on what makes Germany attractive, which is the Zeit-VG for internationals?
A special comment and question to all the people who want to answer, I understood.
Also Wissenschaftszeitvertragsgesetz, it's important if you are paid by the university. Yes, if you're paid by third-party money, it is not important. And I'm not sure if I understand your question right, but I think most of the people coming to Germany, they come with third-party money if they would like to do research here. They applied for third-party money and come here and do research. So I'm not sure if I understand your question right.
I think one major problem of the Wissenschaftszeitvertragsgesetz and the regulations concerning the eligibility for a tenure-track professorship is, first of all, the time frame is too tight, and second, the respective
You're misunderstanding me. No, I mean, if you belong to the group of international researchers who come here and don't have quite a certain idea of whether they want to stay for good or just for, say, 6 months, 2 years for their research project, but then you find it's really attractive to live here with your partner and children because we have great infrastructure, which I always tell internationals, and they decide, oh, I would actually like to stay, and they want to try to apply for a different position than here, one of the positions that we offer as jobs, and then they find, well, I can only do this for a limited amount of time because of this Zeit-VG. So, which is not a problem in their country. So, isn't that the thing that makes Germany absolutely or very unattractive and complicated for international scholars who find that this would be a great place to come and stay for good if only they could also work in research for as long as they want to.
Herr Pertsch.
I think for that type of very complicated questions, there is no easy answer. This is clear, yeah. But what I would answer is, I don't like the idea of making these internationals special cases, yeah, and having like special rules for them which do not apply to the rest of the system, because of two reasons. Yeah, one reason is it's kind of discrimination, and even though I know your perspective is you want to do something good for them, yeah, but at the end it might also turn into discrimination. And the second, which is more stronger for me, the second reason is that I think we should not live from exceptions when talking about internationals, because they are very good in fertilizing and pushing the system towards a new, more like potentially better state, yeah. And therefore, I would like to change the system overall and not just making these rules which allow for certain people to go that track and other people go that track. But we also want to improve it for the Germans to be more flexible and not just for the internationals.
Okay, für ja. Gibt es weitere Fragen, Kommentare? Einmal da und dann hier in der Mitte. Bitte.
Hello, I'm Martin Rehfeld from the University of Bamberg. I'm currently working in the postdoc advisory service, but worked several years in the Wellcome Center for International Researchers as well. And I wanted strongly to support what Julia said, how important it is to learn German and to learn it very early, because when people come for a PhD, for example, for a graduate school, it's very international, they can speak English with everyone, and when they maybe want to stay for good, maybe fall in love, then they realize after having lived in Germany for 3 years, for 5 years, and always having been able to speak English, that not only in the academic career path, it will be different without German, teaching in German, but as a parent, when your children go to kindergarten and you can't speak with the staff there and so on. So I think it would stop that leaky pipeline which we are talking about a little bit when we, on one side, offered more German courses and maybe created positions where you, for example, have to do less teaching when you do a German course, and on the other side, put a little bit more pressure onto internationals to learn German, because it becomes a real disadvantage when your career goes on and when you want to stay in Germany. And you don't feel that, and that's a problem in the early phase of your career.
Mrs. Wöhner.
Yeah, I completely agree. So there was a time when this international thing raises up in Germany. So also at our university we said, so you don't have to learn German. So we are international, you can do everything in English. But after a few years we've done this Rolle rückwärts completely, and we encourage really all doctor researchers to learn German very, very early, because not only for socializing but also for keeping them, yeah. And because this teaching aspect, especially when you teach bachelor students, so at our university nearly all, if it is not an international program, bachelor study, everything is in German. So master studies more and more, they are there's teaching in English, but not on bachelor level. So this is really important, yeah.
How do you feel that, Julia, when you hear that it's there for your reality, living in different countries, learning always the language? When you hear that, is that also your aim to learn as early as possible the language of this country you are working in?
So I spent the last day here and understand almostly everything you talked about here, but it's still difficult for me to communicate myself, and there is a language barrier, and when it's your not even second, not even third, this is one of the languages you know, this is also difficult to switch.
Of course.
And there is a need for sure for me to do classes in the year already, some seminars in German, or answering at least emails in German. What's easier for me for sure than to openly speaking during the class. But I think this is also the aspect, if the person came as a PhD student or a master student and all time stay in Germany. Because if you move again to another country, then you're learning the language of another country, and it was difficult for me to return and go back to my level of knowledge of German after a year, after all those years in different countries.
Yeah. And how do you, just the question, because you have been also in Poland and other countries, how did you perceive there the culture of language? Is it the same as in Germany, or did you manage with English, or were you starting very early to learn the language of the country? How is the comparison of all your international experiences now?
I think in Poland it was quite easy to communicate in English or Russian, and in France it was much difficult. So I learned quite a lot, and just to understand what's happening around me. Just like after Olympics, I have to say it's much better with English during like everyday life communication in the city, but still at the university, 99% of stuff happening in French. So you have to learn, otherwise you're lost.
You're lost. There was another question, I think. Yeah.
Julian Reinfeld, TU Darmstadt. You may not be surprised, you're not the first panel where the majority of the panelists seem to agree that the German system is not a system but a mess, and if we only had one system then it would be transparent and that would solve all sorts of problems. And I always wonder, what do you think, where would that system come from? The federal ministry? I mean, I'm trying to spend project money and I'm happy that it's only project money, and I always think, well, they don't have a clue how universities work. So I'm very happy, I'm a fan, I confess myself a fan of federalism, not because it's ideal, but because it's better than to hope for the wise king or wise queen to come up with one system that fits all, and then it would be transparent and so on and so on. So, and I mean, to make it even more nightmarish, they would hire the McKinseys of the world to come up with the system. And I would not want to work in that system, I guess. And go to the European level, I don't think it gets any better. The European Commission is going to come up with a system, with one system that fits everything, and then all sorts of problems are solved. I think concerning internationalization, there are many more obstacles inside our own university concerning internationalization than the lack of a system that I don't see coming. We can agree on all sorts of panels in the future that, okay. So that's a remark, a question, whoever likes, go ahead.
Yes, I fully agree. We should not roll out the Bologna cycle into the postdoc and after postdoc period. That wouldn't be helpful. And I think there is no country in the world which has a coherent academic system. The more countries you are experiencing, the more you see that there is an enormous diversity in the countries themselves. And the permanent reference to the United States here is a kind of academic routine in Germany, but behind it, it's not a really convincing argument. It's a weak argument because this system is that diverse also. I think what we need is not a coherent system, but we need a consensus on principles, and that's what you were picking up, and I think that's very important, to have principles for academic career pathways, for qualification standards, for the interaction or decoupling of teaching and research, and many other aspects also concerning the academic hierarchies and how to overcome them, to switch the system into a department system. All these elements are important. So we must talk about principles behind these transformations which are going on now, because we are in a momentum. The German system is in a change, and the public did not witness this already, but I think it is. It is an enormous momentum. It is a very, very accelerated process. I think it's not that fast as well, that slow as many people say. And the principles are what we are talking about. We must talk about the general principles behind it.
But that is fitting with your statement. These principles are challenging the universities and are challenging these obstacles you mentioned in the university. We talked yesterday about these principles. Normally, it should be okay to accept these principles. I think there's a way to go. That as we yesterday talked about organizational change, we have some steps to go to adapt really these principles you mentioned. Thank you. And Bert, sorry, yeah.
Yeah, I just want to give a quick reply, is that I think the system now is the sort of lasagna of all new things that have been added. It could be useful. I don't believe in a white sheet and going everywhere for fresh, but I think it will be useful to say, what do we need to discard from the past? Yes, and take the step, for instance, saying you don't need habilitation anymore. Because this was one of the things that make you stand out in Europe. There are some countries where they have habilitation, and there are some, they think habilitation was that before or after the Second World War. They have that, but they have discarded that, and nobody cares anymore. So the question is also, what do we want to discard? I think the discussion of departmentalization versus chair is something that really could be a discussion, which is actually based on principles. Do we want to have a more fluid environment for our professorships from the junior to the senior level, or do we want to have this classical hierarchy, which is probably good when von Humboldt was still alive, but we are 150 years later. So these are the kind of questions. I think you could benefit by just discarding a number of rules and opening up new possibilities, and probably that would generate new problems as well, and see how we can solve them. But if you always add new rules, new systems, and new parts to the already existing framework, at some point in time you probably get into trouble.
And we are talking about criteria and so on. There is another remark question. Yes.
Hi, I'm Inga Melzer from Uniklinik Hamburg-Eppendorf. Actually, I have a comment and a question to Professor Overlit, and it's about the transparency in recruiting professors, because I think the Verfahren here in Germany, this is very intransparent. I mean, just as an example, we have the call for applications, which might be open. Sometimes you never even know what strategy is behind that. It might be the head of some institute, and maybe the university has already decided that it should be somebody from, I don't know, a specific field. I'm from the medical life science field. So let's say it's somebody with interest in nephrology. And sometimes this is not even in the call. So people, especially from abroad, don't know if they should apply. You have to have a really good network in Germany to be inside the structure of this university to know if it could be successful to apply. Then it's very intransparent who is in the commission. Then we show a bit of transparency by making the hearing open. Then I have been to many hearings, I hear a lot of good candidates, and I have my own ranking. And then I'm always very surprised when the actual ranking comes out and I see who is on 1, 2, 3. And then it's usually, or very often, it's the third candidate on a list who gets appointed, because the first two don't come because they just applied because they want to stay in their own place. And I mean, I'm 46 years old, I've been in the system for 20 years now, and I begin to understand it now. But how should somebody from abroad understand this crazy system? And what I want to ask you is it better in Belgium? And if yes, what do you do to make it better?
Okay. I don't want to claim it's better in Belgium. But I think if you have a vacancy, have a position open, and it is not clear what is expected from the person in that position, that's a very stupid vacancy. I mean, you might get anywhere, right? And so if you want to attract people, the right people, you have to be very precise in what you are posting. So I think this is a general principle we can all agree upon. The practice is, of course, not always perfect. I think what's also important is that if you have a position open, that there is someone that you can contact before applying, and that should be someone relatively highly in the ranks. In our university, it's mostly the department chair or the dean of the faculty, so that you can ask what is really about this, what's not clear, what is the subfield, etc., etc. It doesn't mean that it always works like that. For instance, we often have very open-ended vacancies. We have professorships who are based on the specific funding from the government, which are open. We don't know which. It could be in medicine, it could be engineering. We just say if you are fulfilling these criteria on your research experience and your research achievement, then you can be entitled to do that. And this is for all the fields. And then we have a panel that's coming from the whole university to judge that. So these things exist. Sometimes the university doesn't know yet. I think it is a normal reaction, a normal assumption that the university knows already who they want to. It's not always like that, right? And if you look at it from the inside, it's mostly not the case, and it's actually rarely the case that that person really got the position as well. That's my experience. But it is a normal reaction, I would say, from a candidate. I think it's also very important that universities give feedback to those candidates who were eligible and have not been chosen. So I think this is really a matter of courtesy, and courtesy is sometimes very important. I don't think you can solve everything by making better processes. There is always some uncertainty. There is always some unclarity. There's also some leeway. I mean, you don't want to really fix and put all your money in a specific egg, and you want to have a sort of broader structure. What I think works very well with us is that we try to put very much effort in searching ourselves for good candidates. So we have a search committee for each vacancy, which is not included or is not involved in the actual selection, but has the responsibility to find good candidates with the profiles that we would like to. And they're also available for potential candidates to discuss with them before the application whether that would make a stand or would not make a stand. So I think these are a number of practices that could be helpful. And at least I didn't hear these kind of practices here, but I think it's more university-based than country-based. But these are practices that I think are making the process more effective, less frustrating for those who are not elected, and are basically a form of courtesy to the applicants.
Sie wollten auch, Herr Pertsch.
Yeah, what I wanted to add is I fully agree with you, but I also disagree with the general assumption which seems to be here in the room that the German system is bad, it's a mess. I heard dysfunctionality and all those things, yeah. I mean, I hope I'm not living in a dream world, but I think the German system is quite good, yeah, and I'm pretty proud of how at least the system around what I see works. Yeah? There's always room for improvement, and maybe we should also use the chance here to talk about improvements and ideas how to improve. I mean, we have all understood that there is many aspects which need to be improved, yeah, but how to improve it, this is the thing we should concentrate maybe in the discussion also a bit. Yeah.
But the judgment depends always from the perspective, so experiences and so on, and we are talking about the principles.
But just coming back to your question, I frankly would say that the system did not change that deeply in terms of transparency. I remember very well when I was applying for professorships, it was some 100 years ago from now, but this was the same experience, and not that much has changed. And I think German universities should much more talk about human resources management, about application and appointment processes, not only focusing on research strategies. They have a lot of groups and alliances, and they should exchange on that. We have some good examples here. I wouldn't usually mention any single university, but in this case I do it. The University of Aachen has a very transparent appointment process which can be monitored. So if the applicant wants to know in which period the process is, he can take a look online and learns about the fact that he might not be taken into account because the hearing has already happened. So this is very helpful and quite easy. And there are, of course, always legal problems, but they have have solved the problems and have made it public. And I think this is a role model which can be easily copied by any other of the 90 German universities without any problems. Why don't they do it?
Yeah. Why? Because they are always talking about research and other things, but from the beginning, as you mentioned, communication, transparency, and so on, it's not so often really discussed from the leadership of universities. Really, this is quite difficult because they have they have other things in focus. We should say that also, beside of all the good examples. But I think we are here also to stress on these points. Why don't they copy that? That's not a crime.
One aspect that plays and has changed since that I became a professor is that there has been a time, and this mentality is still there, that you must be very happy that we want to engage you, right? that is not the correct attitude anymore, because the candidate should say, you must be happy that I'm a candidate for your university. So that is not already in all kind of people's minds. From my personal experience, I can say that universities that have more centralized their vacancies are acting better, are doing better than those who leave that to their faculties. Because faculties often don't have the expertise, they don't have the experience, they don't have that much vacancies or positions to fulfill, and they do it their way, which means the way that it was done 20 years ago. But there is no faculty in my university that can ever open a position without being checked thoroughly by central administration, by professionals who do nothing else but doing recruitment and going to central processes, so they don't have any freedom. But there are other universities in Belgium that have a very strong faculty-driven culture, and then one faculty is doing better than the other.
But that will change, I think, this attitude. You are lucky to come in our institution. That will change because if the lack of applications will come in the next years, they will be happy to have some applicants for positions. Frau Wüllner?
Yeah, I would like to add one aspect. Julia, you mentioned it. If early career researchers from outside have identified a possible position, then there is another complicated thing, the job description. So if there's an advertisement of a position, it is for internationals, it is not understandable. It is very, very bureaucratic, and I think we have to change also these description of the job with clear criteria, selection criteria, so that the young people can answer to these criteria. So in our working group, we checked a lot of job advertisements and also of job applications. And we saw that it is very, very difficult from international applications to identify their way, because they write the application with their system in mind, and this is complicated. And so we need, and there are good systems, online systems. If you not have a free CV or free descriptions of your research, then perhaps it is better. So I think there's something to do.
There are some examples also. Frau Gilland-Lutz yesterday mentioned that University of Zurich has introduced a really online form, so that you can standardize and that you can compare better than one candidate is offering this and one other candidate. So there are examples, and I leave to the question of Mr. Alt, why don't we copy them more often and to adapt a little bit? But there are some examples in some institutions which are forward-going, I think. I don't want to blame the whole system, but what is really in Germany, when I'm in discussions with professors or departments also, that's the conviction always that we are able to do that in our way, and so we are able and we are used to choose the best, and this to change, that everybody has to learn or to engage professionals in hiring, that is a very difficult discussion in German faculties and German leadership sport. And so that's my experience. Not to blame everybody, of course. Gibt es noch weitere Fragen? Dort hinten gibt es noch, wir haben noch ein bisschen Zeit und dann hier vorne, ja? Genau.
David Green again, University of Jena. Yeah, we've been talking about how international candidates experience applying for a position at a German university that they've already identified. But in order to identify that position, they have to take a serious look at the German system in the first place. Now, Herr Alt has stressed the fact that even the system in the USA has an awful lot of complexity. That is, of course, true, but I would say to that the larger your pool of positions, the more complexity your system is allowed to have and still remain attractive. And I would say that the German system has too much complexity for its size, and the same applies if you take the EU system as a whole. I would like to see the rules for getting a professorial position, or rather an ongoing position in the German system, simplified to the level where it would fit on an A5 piece of paper. I believe that would get us more interesting candidates from abroad, and I believe it would also be good for other underrepresented groups, for people who didn't train in the right team, who haven't got the right old school tie, or in German, die nicht den richtigen Stahlgeruch haben. That's what I would like to see.
Thank you for the comment. Any reactions on the panel? I see yes, nodding. Okay. So we just leave that. Thank you for your comment. Bitte. Ist an, das wird von der Technik angemacht.
Andrea Lencho from the University of Osnabrück. I would like to add one more component that adds, in my view at least, to the intransparency for internationals, and that's our payment schemes. Julia Emarenko was saying early on, when she was sort of looking at job advertisements, she didn't even know whether it was a PhD position or a postdoc. And you kind of have to look and look into the Kleingedrucktes to see what kind of position it is, and that has to do with the fact that you have always the TVL 13 scheme, and the distinction is whether it's sort of a part-time or a full-time. And then you kind of have to explain to the PhD students that even though it's a part-time, it's a full-time. The expectation is that you kind of work full-time on your PhD and do whatever else needs to be done. But in order to make a distinction between PhD positions and postdoc positions, we kind of came up with this weird construction to kind of open position for 65-75% versus the 100% usually for postdocs. I think this is a real obstacle to create transparency, apart from the fact that it kind of creates all kinds of unfairnesses in the system.
Thank you for this new aspect of payment of TV. No? This is I cannot translate this payment scheme of.
Yes.
I don't know how to.
5 pence or whatever you call it. Yeah. I think the idea of having a position for 65%, expecting people to work 100%, is a very bad habit in academia. It is because they don't have the funding. And I personally am very proud that I made that impossible in my university. It doesn't happen anymore. It used to happen, and but the people who were the most angry on me were the candidates. Because it meant that instead of having 10 positions, you only had 6 anymore. But these 6 were paid in a normal way. So that was a choice we needed to make. That's a very bad habit in not being honest on what is expected and what you're offering. Yeah. And on the long run, it will fail you. But so no, that I fully agree that it's a bad practice, and we have to get rid of that.
And the university are existing based on this exploitation. You have to mention that from early career researchers. So that the space, the whole system, based on that very often.
Yes, of course, you have to look at this is another topic, because if you talk about salaries, there are huge differences in Europe. And there are people doing a PhD with a stipend of 3,000 euros per month. And that's what we get in Belgium, and with full social security. And there are other countries where you get 500 euros and no social security. So I hope the observatory will show that, but I hope especially that the European Commission is willing and having the courage to publish these numbers, because I'm very sure they know that. And to do a little blame and shame. That will increase the attractiveness of Europe as well.
Yeah. It was advertisement page for Belgium.
Pardon?
That was the advertisement page for Belgium to go as
okay,
no. So we just noticed the difference.
We're very happy. We're very happy because I think we are the only case in Europe in which that people with the stipend have full social security. Mm-hmm. So they build pension rights. They have full coverage of if they get unemployed after the stipend, etc. So this is something that we're lucky. Some way we managed to get that from the government, and I'm still surprised nobody is following us. Yeah. So maybe this is an idea for the new government contract.
We shall see how the interpretation of the Koalitionsvertrag will be. Ja. So, wir haben noch ein ganz bisschen. Es gibt hier noch eine Wortmeldung. Genau, bitte. Mikro kommt.
Christian Schmidt from the RPTU Kaiserslautern-Landau. I just want to piggyback off of the question we heard before. I think there is agreement that there is a lack of transparency in advertisements for professorships, but for all kinds of academic positions. And a lot of that has to do with the lack of knowledge about the payment, E13, E14, W1, W2, W3. How do appointment processes, to come back to the earlier question, how do these work? And the German Rectors Conference had a wonderful project, the HRCAR Advanced project, a couple of years, the final year back, in which we always discussed the question, who is best equipped to explain the German system to potential applicants? So as Julia said, you would have loved to see the advertisement sort of explaining the whole thing. That would have meant the advertisement is 20 pages long. And that would mean that each university has their own explanatory institution.
Better
and the question is, who is best equipped? Is it each of us, or is it us as a system? So is it a systemic responsibility, or is it perhaps not even a responsibility, but a challenge for the system or for the individual institution to make us transparent to potential candidates? And of course, there is no easy answer, but maybe you have some ideas and thoughts on that. Thank you.
I definitely prefer to have 50 pages document. It's better than nothing. Like, I can manage and I could read those texts, like, as a researcher. I'm fine with that. Please give me this text.
There's always ChatGPT.
Yeah, Notebook LM will help you with all questions for the documents.
You'll probably end up in the Euraccess website, because there's a lot of information on Euraccess which is not used by many researchers. So it's not only a matter of providing the information, you also find it and find it at the right time. But I just want to, I know transparency is important, and I agree transparency is important, but I want to make another comment on the fact that I worked in industry for a couple of years, so I'm not a typical academic. And I discussed personally with, about conditions working for a financial institutions and what the contract was, etc., etc. But what that all meant, I found out only when I was there. Because we're talking about also that exists in industry as well. This is it's the culture within the company that hires you, and you find a number of things. You find only after a couple of months what they meant, what they said to you, what that really meant. Okay, and that's the same with academia. That's the same if you are international. You're going to other countries. You have to find out. To some extent, you cannot be transparent up front, because it's the experience that you will need to understand some of these things. So there are limits to what transparency you can give, and I think it's also good that the efforts continue during the onboarding process, and then there is some checks after, sometimes a couple of months, of a couple of years, to say, how did that go, this transition from outside to inside. But there's a lot of things you can't explain from the outside if you're not in.
But there's there's something in between with Julia, who said, I didn't know anything about this position.
There's a lot of room to improve. I don't want to say that.
Yeah.
But at some point in time, it stops. And probably you're not at that point yet. But also there is some cultural things that you cannot appropriate, and which may be different from not only from one country to another, but also from one university to another. Even from one faculty to another, because you have very much disciplined cultures. Disciplined cultures are very different from one another.
Julia?
Yeah, and during the workshop in Freiburg, we discussed with the German colleagues that for them it was really important to apply because this is a civil servant position. I figured out that this is a civil servant position when I signed the contract. And they oh, there is a lot of bonuses from this. What kind of bonuses? If you're not part of the system, you have no idea. And a lot of positions selling as a civil servant positions because this is the motivation, they try to motivate you to apply. But for international researchers, civil servant in German, what does it mean? What kind of benefits? Why I have to apply for 75%, but to be a civil servant?
So some more information, but the question was who is able to give this information and who is accepted, because I am sure if there is a paper which is explaining, there will be one university, another Bundesland who say, no, that's not our case. So how is it possible, that's the background of your question, to give information which are really accepted and transparent? That's the problem of our federal system, of our universal system, university system, not universal. So is the HRK the right organization? I asked Mr. Alt, as former president, to give this information?
No, I think the HRK is not responsible for the operational side of the academic system. So in the end, I think it should be bundled by the different alliances. And I think most important is that regardless that there are certain differences, we need the service, and that means the university itself must provide it and must bundle it. And I don't think that a central approach is helpful here, but a better focus on the things which are most relevant for international candidates. That would be improving the standards of the application process.
Frau Wöllner?
So, to my opinion, everybody is responsible to give clear and transparent information. So there are different steps. So in Germany we have this wonderful organization, Research in Germany. So they give a lot of information about doing research in Germany. And then we have the universities, and then we have people responsible at the universities. And so I'm coming from Bochum, Ruhrgebiet. Yeah, so I have a different position than Munich or Berlin. So it's some universities, they stress more this point of marketing and looking for internationals, and other universities are really lucky, and the internationals, they know Berlin, Heidelberg, Munich, so they have no problem, I think, with internationals.
So that's the conclusion. So every university should provide this information, depending also from the regional context and so on and so on. Then there are some general information perhaps about the German system. What is a civil servant here? What are the bonus things? So we are on the way also for that. Who can bundle that? Who can really communicate that in the right way for international researchers, no matter in which stage they are. So just to close this point. Wir sind fast, yes, we have, we are nearly at the end of our discussion. Is there a last remark and question? Yeah, this one question, and then we will.
So we heard now a lot of the problems we have in the international scene, also in Europe, between the differences between the systems, etc., information asymmetry, and so on. But what can be done, maybe also in terms of the latter claim of the fifth freedom of Europe, of innovation, science, and education training? How can we contribute to this fifth freedom by changing our tenure track and career path conditions, so that you can start your career in
Poland, then go to Germany, go to France, maybe then to Denmark, and then back to Germany. So this is more or less without frictions.
Well, at least what we need is a form of portability of social rights. That would be a first step, and coordination of labor conditions. This, I think, is the real challenge, and this is what could generate some form of getting a more homogeneous perspective in Europe, and getting some form of harmonization, not in terms of it's everywhere the same, but that there is at least, we can start with examining the portability of certain rights, which are impossible for the moment. So this might be a first step in getting there. I see you nodding.
No, I mean this EU pension fund resaver, which tries to at least do something about portability of pensions.
Yes.
I'm not sure how it works in practice, but I fully agree with you that the portability of social security would be a crucial thing. Yeah.
And it's a little bit, I think it's parallel with the question now about portability of degrees. Because we have, still is the difference between a French master degree of a German master degree, even if it's the same field with the same courses. And if you move from one country to the other country has to do go through a whole administrative process to get your degree recognized. So this is also one of the things being tackled. Portability of degrees is important, but also I think portability of social rights. And that is extremely delicate material in Europe. So let's try some baby steps just to start from zero to something, and not be too ambitious at the start, because that won't work.
So we will find our German baby steps, I think, in following this discussion. Thank you for the discussion, and I'm really curious to see how we will be discussing this topic, let's say in 5 years. Which steps we will go in 5 years? Will we have the same crucial points, or do we overcome some of these points? So thank you very much for this interesting discussion, for the variety of perspectives and points we have raised. Thank you to the audience for your patience, for your interest.